Good evening, brothers and sisters. I'm sorry I did it earlier, but I was interrupted. So, again, I made this live streaming, and please disregard my earlier live streaming. So, let us begin. In the name of Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Amen. Lord, thank you for another brand new day, another opportunity to serve you, another opportunity to praise you, another opportunity to worship you. Lord, may this little effort that we offer to you be acceptable. Mama Mary, we ask for your intercession and your protection. Amen. So today is our 6th day, and we will be reading from Genesis chapter 35 onwards. And just a little request for those of you who subscribe via Facebook, please also subscribe with my YouTube channel, and please click subscribe and like. Thank you. Genesis 35. God said to Jacob, "Go to Bethel at once and live there. Build an altar there to me, the God who appeared to you when you were running away from your brother Esau." So Jacob said to his family and all who were with him, "Get rid of the foreign gods that you have. Purify yourselves and put on clean clothes. We are going to live here and go to Bethel, where I will build an altar to the God who helped me in the time of my trouble and who has been with me everywhere I have gone." So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods they had and also the earrings that they were wearing. He buried them beneath the oak tree near Shittim. When Jacob and his sons started to leave, great fear fell on the people of the nearby towns, and they did not pursue them. Jacob came with all his people to Luz, which is now known as Bethel, in the land of Canaan. He built an altar there and named the place for the God of Bethel, because God had revealed himself to him there when he was running away from his brother. Rebekah's nurse, Deborah, died and was buried beneath the oak south of Bethel, so it was named Oak of Weeping. When Jacob returned from Mesopotamia, God appeared to him again and blessed him. God said to him, "Your name is Jacob, but from now on it will be Israel." So God named him Israel. And God said to him, "I am Almighty God. Have many children. Nations will be descended from you, and you will be the ancestors of kings. I will give you the land which I gave to Abraham and to Isaac, and I will also give it to your descendants after you." Then God left him. They were there where God had spoken to him. Jacob set up a memorial stone and consecrated it by pouring wine and olive oil on it. He named the place Bethel. Jacob and his family left Bethel, and when they were still some distance from Ephrath, the time came for Rachel to have her baby, and she was having difficult labor. When her labor pains were at their worst, the midwife said to her, "Don't be afraid, Rachel. It's another boy." But she was dying, and as she breathed her last, she named her son Benoni, but his father named him Benjamin. When Rachel died, she was buried beside the road to Ephrath, now known as Bethlehem. Jacob set up a memorial stone there. and it still marks Rachel's grave to this day. Jacob moved on to set up his camp on the other side of the Tower of Eder. While Jacob was living in that land, Reuben had sexual intercourse with Bilhah, one of his father's concubines. Jacob heard about it and was furious. Jacob had 12 sons. The sons of Leah were Reuben, Jacob's oldest son, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel were Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Rachel's slave Bilhah were Dan and Naphtali. The sons of Leah's slave Silpah were Gad and Asher. These sons were born in Mesopotamia. Jacob went to his father Isaac at Mamre near Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had lived. Isaac lived to be 180 years old and died at a ripe old age, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. These are the descendants of Esau, also called Edom. Esau married Canaanite woman Ada, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, Oholibamah, the daughter of Anna, son of Sibeon the Hivite, and Basimath, the daughter of Ismael and sister of Nebawit. Ada bore Eliphaz, Basimath bore Reuel, and Oholibamah bore Josh, Jalam, and Korah. All these sons were born to Esau in the land of Canaan. Then Esau took his wives, his sons, his daughters, and all the people of his house, along with all his livestock and all the possessions he had gotten in the land of Canaan, and went away from his brother Jacob to another land. He left because the land where he had and Jacob were living was not able to support them. They had too much livestock and could no longer stay together. So Esau lived in the hill country of Edom. These are the descendants of Esau, the ancestor of the Edomites. Esau's wife Ada bore him one son, Eliphaz, and Eliphaz had 5 sons, Timan, Omar, Sipo, Gatam, and Kinas. And by another wife, Timnah, he had one more son, Amalek. Esau's wife, Basimath, bore him one son, Reuel, and Reuel had 4 sons, Nahath, Zerah, Shammah, and Misa. Esau's wife, Oholibamah, the daughter of Anna, son of Sibeon, bore him 3 sons, Jeush, Jalam, and Korah. There are the tribes descended from Esau. Esau's first son Eliphaz was the ancestor of the following tribes: Timan, Omar, Zippo, Kinas, Korah, Gatam, and Amalek. These were all descendants of Esau's wife Ada. Esau's son Reuel was the ancestor of the following tribes: Nahath, Serah, Shammah, and Misa. These were all descendants of Esau's wife Basimath. The following tribes were descended from Esau by his wife Oholibamah, the daughter of Anna: Jeush, Jalam, and Korah. All these tribes were descended from Esau. The original inhabitants of the land of Edom were divided into tribes which trace their ancestry to the following descendants of Seir, Hurite, Lotan, Shobal, Sibeon, Anna, Dishon, Ezer, and Disna. Lotan was the ancestor of the clans of Hiri and Heman. Lotan had a sister named Timnah. Shubal was the ancestor of the clans of Alvan, Manahath, Ebal, Shippo, and Onam. Sibeon had two sons, Aya and Ana. This is the Ana who found the hot spring in the wilderness when he was taking care of his father's donkeys. Ana was the father of Dishon, who was the ancestor of the clans of Himdan, Isban, Itran, and Chiran. Ana also had a daughter named Oholibama. Eser was the ancestor of the clans of Bilhah, Shaavan, and Akan. Dishan was the ancestor of the clans of Uz and Aran. These are the Horite tribes in the land of Edom: Lotan, Shubal, Sibeon, Ana, Dishon, Eser, and Dishan. The kings of Edom. Before there were any kings in Israel, the following kings ruled the land of Edom in succession: Bela, son of Beor from Denhabah; Jubab, son of Zerah from Bozrah; Husham from the region of Teman; Hadad, son of Bedad from Abith. He defeated the Midianites in a battle in the country of Moab. Samlah from Masrekah; Shaul from Rehoboth on the river Baal; Hanan, son of Achbor; Hadad from Pau. His wife was Mehetabel, the daughter of Matred and granddaughter of Meshahab. Esau was the ancestor of the following Edomite tribes: Timnah, Alva, Jethet, Oholibama, Elah, Pinon, Kinas, Timan, Mibsar, Magdiel, and Iram. The area where each of these tribes lived was known by the name of the tribe. Jacob continued to live in the land of Canaan, where his father had lived, and this is the story of Jacob's family. Joseph, a young man of 17, took care of the sheep and goats with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and Silpah, his father's concubines. He brought bad reports to his father about what his brothers were doing. Jacob loved Joseph more than all his other sons because he had been born to him when he was old. He made a long robe with full sleeves for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved Joseph more than he loved them, they hated their brother so much that they would not speak to him in a friendly manner. One time Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him even more. He said, "Listen to the dream I had. We were all in the field tying up sheaves of wheat when my sheaf got up and stood up straight. Yours formed a circle around mine and bowed down to it. Do you think you are going to be a king and rule over us?" His brothers asked. So they hated him even more because of his dreams and because of what he said about them. Then Joseph had another dream and told his brothers, "I had another dream in which I saw the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowing down to me." He also told the dream to his father, and his father scolded him. "What kind of a dream is that? Do you think that your mother, your brothers, and I are going to come and bow down to you?" Joseph's brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept thinking about the whole matter. One day, when Joseph's brothers had gone to Shechem to take care of their father's flock, Jacob said to Joseph, I want you to go to Shechem, where your brothers are taking care of the flock. Joseph answered, I am ready. His father told him, Go and see if your brothers are safe and if the flock is all right. Then come back and tell me. So his father sent him on his way from Hebron Valley. Joseph arrived at Shechem and was wandering around in the country when a man saw him and asked him, What are you looking for? I am looking for my brothers who are taking care of their flock. He answered, Can you tell me where they are? The man said, They have already left. I heard them say that they were going to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. They saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted against him and decided to kill him. They said to one another, Here comes that dreamer. Come on now, let's kill him and throw his body into one of the dry wells. We can say that a wild animal killed him. Then we will see what becomes of his dream. Reuben heard them and tried to save Joseph. Let's not kill him, he said. Just throw him into this well in the wilderness, but don't hurt him. He said, this planning to save him from them and send him back to his father. When Joseph came up to his brothers, they ripped off his long robe with full sleeves. Then they took him and threw him into the well, which was dry. While they were eating, they suddenly saw a group of Ishmaelites traveling from Gilead to Egypt. Their camels were loaded with spices and raisins. Judah said to his brothers, What will we gain by killing our brother and covering up the murder? Let's sell him to these Ishmaelites. Then we won't have to hurt him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. His brothers agreed, and when some Midianite traders came by, the brothers pulled Joseph out of the wheel and sold him for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt. When Reuben came back to the well and found that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes in sorrow. He returned to his brothers and said, The boy is not there. What am I going to do? Then they killed a goat and dipped Joseph's robe in its blood. They took the robe to their father and said, We found this. Does it belong to your son? He recognized it and said, Yes, it is his. Some wild animal has killed him. My son Joseph has been torn to pieces. Jacob tore his clothes in sorrow and put on sackcloth. He mourned for his son a long time. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, I will go down to the world of the dead, still mourning for my son. So he continued to mourn for his son Joseph. Meanwhile, in Egypt, the Midianite had sold Joseph to Potiphar, one of the king's officers, who was the captain of the palace guard. About that time, Judah left his brothers and went to stay with a man named Hira, who was from the town of Adullam. There, Judah met a young Canaanite woman whose father was named Shua. She married her and she bore him a son, whom he named Er. She became pregnant again and bore another son and named him Unan. Again she had a son and named him Shelah. Judah was at Atshib when the boy was born. For his first son, Er, Judah got a wife whose name was Tamar. Er's conduct was evil, and it displeased the Lord. So the Lord killed him. Then Judah said to Er's brother Onan, Go and sleep with your wife's widow, with your brother's widow, Fulfill your obligation to her as her husband's brother, so that your brother may have some descendants. But Onan knew that the children would not belong to him. So when he had intercourse with his brother's widow, he let the semen spill on the ground, so that there would be no children for his brother. What he did displeased the Lord, and the Lord killed him also. Then Judah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, "Return to your father's house and remain a widow until my son Shelah grows up." He said this because he was afraid that Shelah would be killed, as his brothers had been. So Tamar went back home. After some time, Judah's wife died. When he had finished the time of mourning, he and his friend Hira of Adullam went to Timnah, where his sheep were being sheared. Someone told Tamar that her father-in-law was going to Timnah to shear his sheep. So she changed from the widow's clothes she had been wearing, covered her face with a veil, and sat down at the entrance of Enaim, a town on the road of Timnah. As she will know, Judah's youngest son Shelah has now grown up, and yet she had not been given to him in marriage. When Judah saw her, he thought that she was a prostitute because she had her face covered. He went over her at the side of the road and said, "All right, how much do you charge?" He did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. She said, "What will you give me?" He answered, "I will send you a young goat from my flock." She said, "All right, if you will give me something to keep as a pledge until you sell the goat." "What shall I give you as a pledge?" he asked. She answered, "Your seal with its cord and the walking stick you are carrying." He gave them to her. Then they had intercourse, and she became pregnant. Tamar went home, took off her veil, and put her widow's clothes back on. Judah sent his friend Hira to take the goat and get back from the woman the articles he had pledged, but Hira could not find her. He asked some men at Enaim, "Where is the prostitute who was here by the road?" "There has never been a prostitute here," they answered. He returned to Judah and said, "I couldn't find her." The men of the place said there had never been a prostitute there. Judah said, "Let her keep the things. We don't want people to laugh at us. I did not try to pay her, but you couldn't find her." About 3 months later, someone told Judah, "Your daughter-in-law, Tamar, had been acting like a whore, and now she is pregnant." Judah ordered, "Take her out and burn her to death." As she was being taken out, she sent word to her father-in-law, "I am pregnant by the man who owns these things. Look at them and see whose they are. This seal with its cord and this walking stick." Judah recognized them and said, "She is in the right. I have failed in my obligation to her. I should have given her to my son Shelah in marriage." And Judah never had intercourse with her again. When the time came for her to give birth, it was discovered that she was going to have twins. While she was in labor, one of them put out an arm. The midwife caught it, tied a red thread around it, and said, "This one was born first." But he pulled his arm back, and his brother was born first. Then the midwife said, "So this is how you break your way out." So he was named Perez. Then his brother was born with the red thread on his arm, and he was named Sarah. Now the Ishmaelites had taken Joseph to Egypt and sold him to Potiphar, one of the king's officers, who was the captain of the palace guard. The Lord was with Joseph and made him successful. He lived in the house of his Egyptian master, who saw that the Lord was with Joseph and had made him successful in everything he did. Potiphar was pleased with him and made him his personal servant. So he put him in charge of his house and everything he owned. From then on, because of Joseph, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian and everything that he had in his house and in his fields. Potiphar turned over everything he had to the care of Joseph and did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Joseph was well built and good looking, and after a while his master's wife began to desire Joseph and asked him to go to bed with her. He refused and said to her, "Look, my master does not have to concern himself with anything in the house because I am here. He has put me in charge of everything he has. I have as much authority in this house as he has, and he has not kept back anything from me except you. How then could I do such an immoral thing and sin against God?" Although she asked Joseph day after day, he would not go to bed with her. But one day, when Joseph went into the house to do his work, none of the house servants was there. She caught him by his robe and said, "Come to bed with me." But he escaped and ran outside, leaving his robe in her hand. When she saw that he had left his robe and had run out of the house, she called to her house servant and said, "Look at this. This Hebrew that my husband brought to the house is insulting us. He came into my room and tried to rape me, but I screamed as loud as I could. When he heard me scream, he ran outside, leaving his robe beside me." She kept his robe with her until Joseph's master came home. Then she told him the same story. "That Hebrew slave that you brought here came into my room and insulted me. But when I screamed, he ran outside, leaving his robe beside me." Joseph's master was furious and had Joseph arrested and put in the prison where the king's prisoners were kept, and there he stayed. But the Lord was with Joseph and blessed him, so that the jailer was pleased with him. He put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and made him responsible for everything that was done in the prison. The jailer did not have to look after anything for which Joseph was responsible, because the Lord was with Joseph and made him succeed in everything he did. Sometime later, the king of Egypt's wine steward and his chief baker offended the king. He was angry with these two officials and put them in prison in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same place where Joseph was being kept. They spent a long time in prison, and the captain assigned Joseph as their servant. One night, there in prison, the wine steward and the chief baker each had a dream, and the dreams had different meanings. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were upset. He asked them, "Why do you look so worried today?" They answered, "Each of us had a dream, and there is no one here to explain what the dreams mean." "It is God who gives the ability to interpret dreams," Joseph said. "Tell me your dreams." So the wine steward said, "In my dream, there was a grapevine in front of me with three branches on it. As soon as the leaves came out, the blossoms appeared and the grapes ripened. I was holding the king's cup, so I took the grapes and squeezed them into the cup and gave it to him." Joseph said, "This is what it means. The three branches are 3 days. In 3 days, the king will lease you pardon and restore you to your position. You will give him his cup as you did before when you were his wine steward. But please remember me when everything is going well for you, and please be kind enough to mention me to the king and help me get out of this prison. After all, I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here in Egypt, I didn't do anything to deserve being put in prison. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation of the wine steward's dream was favorable, he said to Joseph, I had a dream too. I was carrying three bread baskets on my head. In the top basket, there were all kinds of baked goods for the king, and the birds were eating them. Joseph answered, This is what it means. The three baskets are 3 days. In 3 days, the king will release you and have your head cut off. Then he will hang your body on a pole, and the birds will eat your flesh. On his birthday, 3 days later, the king gave a banquet for all his officials. He released his wine steward and his chief baker and brought them before his officials. He restored the wine steward to his former position, but executed the chief baker. It all happened just as Joseph had said, but the wine steward never gave Joseph another thought. He forgot all about him. After 2 years had passed, the king of Egypt dreamed that he was standing by the Nile River when 7 cows, fat and sleek, came up out of the river and began to feed on the grass. Then 7 other cows came up. They were thin and bony. They came and stood by the other cows on the river bank, and the thin cows ate up the fat cows. Then the king woke up. He fell asleep again and had another dream. 7 heads of grain, full and ripe, were growing on one stalk. Then 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the desert wind, and the thin heads of grain swallowed the full ones. The king woke up and realized that he had been dreaming. In the morning, he was worried, so he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. He told them his dreams, but no one could explain them to him. Then the wine steward said to the king, I must confess today that I have done wrong. You were angry with the chief baker and me, and you put us in prison in the house of the captain of the guard. One night, each of us had a dream, and the dreams had different meanings. A young Hebrew was there with us, a slave of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us. Things turned out just as he said. You restored me to my position, but you executed the baker. The king sent Joseph, and he was immediately brought from the prison. After he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came into the king's presence. The king said to him, I had a dream, and no one can explain it. I have been told that you can interpret dreams. Joseph answered, I cannot, Your Majesty, but God will give a favorable interpretation. The king said, I dreamed that I was standing on the bank of the Nile when 7 cows, fat and sleek, came up out of the river and began feeding on the grass. Then 7 other cows came up, which were thin and bony. They were the poorest cows I have ever seen anywhere in Egypt. The thin cows ate up the fat ones, but no one would have known it. No one would have known it because they looked just as bad as before. Then I woke up. I also dreamed that I saw 7 heads of grain which were full and ripe, growing in one stalk. Then 7 heads of grain sprouted thin and scorched by the desert wind, and the thin heads of grain swallowed the full ones. I told the dreams to the magicians, but none of them could explain them to me. Jesus said to the king, "The two dreams mean the same thing. God has told you what he is going to do. The 7 fat cows are 7 years, and the 7 full heads of grain are also 7 years. They have the same meaning. The 7 thin cows, which came up later, and 7 thin heads of grain scorched by the desert wind, are 7 years of famine. It is just as I told you. God has shown you what He is going to do. There will be 7 years of great plenty in all the land of Egypt. After that, there will be 7 years of famine, and all the good years will be forgotten, because the famine will ruin the country. The time of plenty will be entirely forgotten, because the famine which follows will be so terrible. The repetition of your dream means that the matter is fixed by God and that He will make it happen in the near future. Now you should choose some man with wisdom and insight and put him in charge of the country. You must also appoint other officials and take a fifth of the crops during the 7 years of plenty. Order them to collect all the food during the good years that are coming, and give them authority to store up grain in the cities and guard it. The food will be reserved supply for the country during the 7 years of famine, which are going to come on Egypt. In this way, the people will not starve. The king and his officials approved this plan, and he said to them, "We will never find a better man than Joseph, a man who has God's Spirit in him." The king said to Joseph, "God has shown you all this, so it is obvious that you have greater wisdom and insight than anyone else. I will put you in charge of my country, and all my people will obey your orders. Your authority will be second only to mine. I now appoint you governor over all Egypt." The king removed from his finger the ring engraved with the royal seal and put it on Joseph's finger. He put a fine linen robe on him and placed a gold chain around his neck. He gave him the second royal chariot to ride in, and his guard of honor went ahead of him and cried out, "Make way, make way." And so Joseph was appointed governor over all Egypt. The king said to him, "I am the king, and no one in all Egypt shall so much as lift a hand or a foot without your permission." He gave Joseph the Egyptian name Saphenath Pineah, and he gave him a wife, Asenath, the daughter of Potipherah, a priest in the city of Heliopolis. Joseph was 30 years old when he began to serve the king of Egypt. He left the king's court and traveled all over the land during the 7 years of plenty, and the land produced abundant crops, all of which Joseph collected and stored in the cities. In each city, he stored the food from the fields around it. There was so much grain that Joseph stopped measuring it. It was like the sand of the sea. Before the years of famine came, Joseph had two sons by Asenath. He said, "God had made me forget all my sufferings and all my father's family." So he named his first son Manasseh. He also said, "God has given me children in the land of my trouble." So he named his second son Ephraim. The 7 years of plenty that the land of Egypt had enjoyed came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in every country, but there was food throughout Egypt. When the Egyptians began to be hungry, they cried out to the king for food. So he ordered them to go to Joseph and do what he told them. The famine grew worse and spread over the whole country. So Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians. People came to Egypt from all over the world to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe anywhere. So, anhi lang sa takutob mga brothers and sisters. Ugma na pod. And again, please subscribe sa YouTube channel. Like and subscribe. Thank you and good evening.